The first principle is the law of motion. We are constantly in motion within the universe, within time. Time is eternal, and time records every single thing that comes out of you. And the key words are every single thing, the smallest as well as the biggest. Time doesn't discriminate to say, oh, this is important and that's not important. Everything is important and everything is recorded indelibly. And if you will begin to understand that and keep that uppermost in your mind at all times, that every single thing that emanates from you or is emoted from you is recorded, and it is recorded inside you, on you. You are the book that time writes it in. And it, over time, it creates a tapestry of your life or of your existence. And, you know, at a particular moment, one could say, tell me about your life. All those experiences are recorded there, whether you remember them or you do not. There's a reason why I'm telling you this. Because the second law that you need to become aware of is the law of reciprocal effect. Every experience that you have has an effect on your surroundings, whether you realize it or not. Every thought, every word, every action has an effect on your surroundings. So many times, you know, we say, well, I'm all for peace and loving my fellow man, and yet in your everyday language, you use violence, aggressive language. Those words carry energy, and that energy gets distributed into the universe. And then we wonder why there is so much aggression and violence in the world. Even though we don't feel like we're really engaging in that kind of activity, but every exclamation that we use a violent word. So these are things that we have to become aware of. The law of reciprocal effect. The other side of this law is that as much as everything that comes out of you impacts your surroundings, everything that's coming from your surroundings impacts you. And you respond by generating a thought, a word, or a deed. So it's like a reciprocal effect. It's going both ways. And you have to become more conscious of that. The third law is the law of attraction. You attract to yourself everything that is similar to what's inside you. And whatever you put out, it attracts everything else out there that is of the same kind as what you just put out. And it attracts it to you. That is the basic law of attraction. In the same way, you are attracted to others who are holding within themselves whatever it is you yourself wanting, holding, longing for. As it is, for most of us, we walk around, we carry around within us a mixture. We have some anger, we have some desire for peace, we have some, sadness and regret, we have some desire for joy. Like we have all this mixed up inside us. I don't think there's a single one of us that could claim not to have some mixture. Well, you will attract all of them, all at the same time. And then what do you end up with? Chaos inside you. But the predominant ones will kind of vie for supremacy within you. Fourth law is the law of cycles. The law of cycles is really the flip side of the law of motion. Everything is in constant motion. That means you are in constant motion. The way you feel today is not the way you're going to be feeling tomorrow. And if I talk to you today, you had a fight with your boyfriend, and you told me all these terrible things, I'm so mad at him, and then a few days down the road, I ask you, oh, by the way, how's Jeff? And you're like, oh, Jeff, oh, I love him so much. You've changed, right? You're constantly in flux. But the anger that you felt 5 years ago, 5 days ago, 2 years ago, already had gone out into motion. And it gets attracted to other anger, and it finds its way back to you. Even though now you're all lovey-dovey with Jeff. Okay, this is so important. So I'll give you a simple hypothetical example, and this is purely hypothetical. Let's say you and Jeff are married, and you're having all kinds of conflict in the marriage, fighting, yelling at each other, using all kinds of language when addressing each other. And you get pregnant, and then you're faced with, should we get divorced, or shall we carry on with this marriage? And you decide to go to therapy. You're going to go to counseling. So you go to counseling. And the counseling, of course, takes a couple of years to bring about any real change. But in the meantime, you've had a child. Let's say you have a daughter. You go to counseling, and the counseling actually yields good results, and you're working to understand each other better, change your dynamic. Now, it's been 3 years later, it's 4 years later, 5 years later, and the school calls and says, this child is an angry child. And you go from child psychologist to child psychologist to child psychiatrist, trying to deal with a child who is out of control and always angry. You cannot see how this came about. But if you understand how the laws operate, then you will understand that this crisis in your life now started years ago, at a time when you yourself were full of anger and conflict. So we have to understand that whatever is happening to us right now is the cumulative effect of all that has happened with us up to now. And if we don't acknowledge that about ourselves and realize that we can't expect everything to be like hunky-dory and perfectly fine just because we decided that today I'm going to change. The law of cycles must be taken into account. That everything from the past combines with everything in the present to create the future.
How do we break the cycle?
Good question. All right, so let's talk about the fifth law. The fifth law is the law of gravity. The law of gravity is also the law of motion. In fact, when you think about all the laws, you realize there's only one law. It's the law of motion. The law of gravity says, you're never standing still, never. You're either moving forward or you're moving backwards. You're either moving upwards or you're moving downwards. You're either progressing or you're retrogressing. You're never still. So if you realize that, then you have to take all these laws together, all together, put them together and put them into account and realize that this moment, you have control over this moment. You have no control over the moment that has already passed. That's number one. Number two, this moment is an open book. It is up to you what you want to write into it. Or it's up to you what you want, Mother Time to write into it. Once it's written, you have no control over the next moment, because this moment is going to determine the next moment. The only thing you have control over is this moment. Try to get that as deeply ingrained in your being as you possibly can. because it is the only way to change tomorrow. You can't change today because today is the result of yesterday. And yesterday is already gone, gone, gone. And whatever you're experiencing today is the result of whatever you experienced or put out or set in motion yesterday. Whether it's happy or sad or a mixture of both. For most of us, it's a mixture of both. For the world, it's mostly sad. So at this moment, when you look at what's happening with you and you can remind yourself, this is the result of things that were already set in motion, then be aware that how you respond to it, how you react to it, sets something new in motion. So if you respond with dissatisfaction, anger, why is this happening? Oh, all these people out there are responsible for the terrible things that are going on. Then you're just putting out more of the same, and you're going to draw more of the same, and there will never be an end to it, which is exactly what is happening to us today. But we can bring an end to it. The only thing is that if we are conscious of the law, then we know that the change, if you change something today, the result of the change will not be today. If you change something this instant, the results can be in the next instant, but it won't be in the same instant. And that's what I think I would like you to really, really bear in mind and understand.
Which is that I feel hopeful for the change. And the reason why I do is because there's a lot of people that are becoming more conscious. It's just not really brought out into the regular news media and recently I've been privy to a lot of global people that are really doing really beautiful work in organizations. To your point, I don't know what they're doing in their home lives, but I just feel, I don't know, I just feel hopeful.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There is no reason why we shouldn't be hopeful. We should be hopeful. And the reason we should be hopeful is because life is really eternal. So we can continually and eternally suffer, or we can put an end to this constant recurring cycle of suffering and conflict. You can't go out there and make Russia stop invading Ukraine or stop the Taliban from, attacking its own people. But you can contribute to strengthening the good in human beings all around the world. And it's a question of critical mass. changes come about through critical mass. And as much as critical mass leads to changes for the better, critical mass also leads to changes for the worse, as you can well see.
Thank you. I quickly had a question about the law of gravity and the law of motion. I don't know if I heard incorrectly, but to me it sounds like the law of motion and the law of gravity are the same thing. So how do they differ?
Right. In fact, all the laws are one law. Really, if you think about it carefully, all the laws involve motion. So the law of attraction, things that are attracted to you move towards you, right? The law of reciprocal effect, whatever you put out goes out of you. It's moving. So everything is really an expression of the law of motion. The law of gravity simply says, yeah, it's moving, but it never stops. And it moves up or moves down, it moves forward or it moves backwards, but it cannot stand still. The moment it attempts to stand still, it's already moving backwards. That's basically the law.
So I want to ask about, well, not ask, more comment about what you just said about critical mass, because I think that you said that it can also go in the wrong direction. And I think that that's something that we tend to get into. I mean, even in the examples you used, you said Russia, you're picking a side, you're doing a separation.
No.
Okay, because that's what I want explained, because I think what happens is people go, I believe this, or I believe that, and then we're back in conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So in fact, people think that if I want to see this change, okay? Like the people in Ukraine are suffering. The people in Russia themselves are also suffering from this war. Russia has invaded Ukraine. There's a war, okay? It doesn't matter who's right or wrong. There is suffering. There's war. I, as an individual, cannot stop that war. That's what I'm driving at. I cannot change that, and I cannot find this person or that person responsible, but they're suffering. The only way things like that will change, the only way the suffering will change is when there's a critical mass of human beings whose way of thinking and being goes out and connects with other human beings whose way of thinking and being is directed towards peace, love, patience, caring, giving, and less conflict, quarreling, fighting, blaming, hating, and so on. Now, we may think to ourselves that we don't do that. We're not guilty of that. But every single interaction that we have with a fellow human being contributes either to raise the universal, shall we say, the universal consciousness, or lower it. Every single interaction. But more important, what I would like us to kind of think about is that we have the potential, the possibility to bring about change, first of all, in ourselves by paying a little bit more attention to everything that comes out of us, knowing that everything that comes out of you or out of me contributes to increasing the chaos in the world or decreasing the chaos in the world. But before that, become conscious of the fact that everything that comes out of you contributes to increasing the chaos in your existence or decreasing the chaos in your existence. Let's put the world aside and focus on your individual person, not even your loved ones or your friends, but just yourself. That understanding that, as they say, your charity has to begin at home, and home is within yourself, within yourself. So if I could leave you with anything, it would be for you to go home and understand and make a resolution to change the way in which you think, to really change the way in which you think. And begin to use your thoughts for peacefulness, kindness, love, helpfulness, and non-blaming, and wanting to increase the light inside you. And by knowing about these laws, you know that if you work on that, then around you will automatically change. Your moments will become less and less of the chaotic kinds of thoughts and more of the clear, crisp, pure kind of thoughts. And when that happens, then your words will also carry those kinds of thoughts through. You will become more conscious of paying attention to your words, to what you say, how you say it. And then the third thing that'll happen is, because of you paying attention to what you think, how you feel, and how you say things and what you say, you will naturally, the things you do will naturally change. And your days and your moments will gradually become different. And if your moments become gradually different, your surroundings and the people that you interact with will also interact differently with you. You will interact differently with them, and they will interact differently with you. That's what I would like us to take home from this. All this that I'm telling you is information that I came across and started kind of learning about years ago. But I can't claim that I changed just from knowing this. In fact, it's taken me 4 or 5 decades, and I'm still working on it. So we don't become immediately perfect, but we can see the results when we put these principles into practice. And for me, it started out with me reading this book, In the Light of Truth.
I'm reminded of what Maya Angelou said. You know, people will not remember your actions, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And that's always been really powerful for me.
It's true that people won't remember your actions, they will remember how you made them feel. But in fact, how you made them feel comes from your words, your way of being, as well as your actions. But your words and your way of being are more important, because that's what results in how a person is going to feel.